You learned from a very young age that the world is a dangerous place and that you're on your own. That's what my therapist told me when I first started counseling and therapy. And you know what? She was right. Like, I think about the things that I have survived, various forms of abuse throughout childhood, an attempted kidnapping, community violence, intimate partner abuse within my own relationships, codependency within my own relationships, imposter syndrome, and abusive and oppressive work environments. Yeah, I've been through some things, but you know what? At 49 years old, I can tell you with the utmost certainty, I don't play about me.
All the baddest queens rule like this. Yeah, they rule like this. All the baddest queens rule like this. Yeah. Crown on my head, yeah, I built my own throne. Don't need a king, I can get it alone. Swipe the black card, hit the register, sing. Heard you were the man, but I run everything. Got my own bag, it's a Birkin, you see. He wanna text back, but he stuck on scene. I set the price tag, I don't ask for the cost, cause I'm the main character, always the boss. Let's go. All the baddest queens rule like this. Yeah, they rule like this. That's right. All the baddest queens rule like this. Walk in the room and the temperature change. They all go quiet, they whisper my name. Heard what they said, but I don't feel the shame. I'm playing chess, this is more than a game. They follow my lead, trying to copy the style, but I'm always one step ahead by a mile. Made him go broke, spend it all on a whim. Now he's outside the club, can't even get in. Bye. Cause all the baddest queens rule like this. Yeah, they rule like this. You know it. All the baddest queens rule like this. Cause all the baddest queens.
Welcome to the Empowered and in Control podcast, the podcast that helps people who have been impacted by domestic abuse to heal and regain power and control after an abusive relationship using the Empowered and in Control framework. I'm your host, Oriana, your favorite domestic violence expert, speaker, and owner of To Rise Advocacy and Consulting, LLC. I have spent about a decade working in the domestic violence field, navigating different roles from advocate to expert witness. And some of the most surprising things that I have learned while being in this field were about me. It was about my journey to getting here, to this point of being empowered and in control. For me, self-awareness led to self-compassion. That self-compassion led to more self-love. I already had some, right? But we could always step our game up a little bit, right? That self-love turned into self-worth. And that self-worth is what does not allow me to be gaslit, to be disrespected, to be controlled in any setting, be it relationship or employer. And so I know who I am and I know what I'm worth. And you should know those things about yourself too. Look, when I say I don't play about me, that's not just me. You shouldn't play about you either. The things that you have been through, the things you have survived, that people, it blows their mind that you've even been through that. You are the survival guide, right? Hey, the Empowered and in Control wheel and its guide is a hopeful tool that I developed for people who are impacted by domestic abuse. It's a healing-centered tool that creates a pattern of positive behaviors that people can use to regain power and control after an abusive relationship. Click the link in the description to get your copy for yourself or for someone that you know who is struggling to move forward after the trauma of an abusive relationship. You can be empowered and in control again. Right? And so you shouldn't play about you either. Because here's the thing. When you learn more about yourself, then you have a tendency to give yourself more grace than you typically would. I think a lot of us have a tendency to be very hard on ourselves, and that doesn't really do any good. For me, self-awareness came in the forms of finding out what my strengths are, what my true strengths are. Not just, well, I think I'm good at, no. Doing an assessment. Because I'm a nerd. Look, anybody who knows me, family, y'all know, I am comfortable in my weird and nerdy skin. And every opportunity that I have to learn something new, whether it's about myself or whether it's about the work that I do, I'm going to take that opportunity, right? So it wasn't even something that I was seeking out for self-improvement. It was through the course of these employers that I've had, I was put in situations where I had the opportunity to learn more about myself, which kudos to them, right, for the professional development. So it came in the form of learning what my strengths are. Jana Cardona is a fabulous Gallup strengths coach. And learning what my top 5 strengths were actually helped me wrap my head around why starting this business was not only important, but it was completely suited for what my strengths are, right? And then more personal development came from learning what my learning style is. Not everybody learns in the same way. And I think that's something that often causes conflict, because sometimes we're thinking that people should see it from our point of view, from our perspective, and that they learn in the same way that we do. Some people are more auditory learners, some are more visual, some are more kinetic, where they have to be hands-on, right? What type of learner are you? Because what I found in working with a certain young lady at that particular job, the way that she was being expected to perform in her job did not match up with the way that she learns. The way that she was being trained was not a way that she typically learns well, right? So if someone is telling you that you need to do X, Y, and Z, and then you need to do that, and just running through the things that need to be done and telling it to you, but you're more so a kinetic learner and you have to have it hands-on, you have to do it in order to learn it. That's a difference, and that's something that has to be taken into consideration so that you can be operating in your strengths, right? And in your learning style. Then, like I said, there have been plenty of opportunities that I've had for personal development that also didn't have anything to do with my employer, right? The strengths and the learning style, yes, fantastic. But then outside of work, there was a grief recovery, and that was really just because I recognized that within this field, a lot of times we don't allow survivors of domestic abuse to grieve. We feel like they should just be happy that they're out of the situation. But we're not wrapping our head around the fact that they loved this person. They didn't want the relationship to end, they just wanted the violence to stop. So I went through grief counseling because I was kind of having a hard time getting through the end of a relationship, not an abusive relationship, a really good one. And so that's hard when you've been through a lot of abusive relationships and then you have a really good one and it ends. That's a little tough. So I went through grief recovery, and I learned that throughout that, there are traumas that I didn't even consider to be a loss. I didn't recognize them as a loss, and therefore I did not heal from them properly because I didn't know to grieve it properly. And that's something that's so important for survivors of domestic abuse, because if you're not able to look at the good and the bad, right? If you're not able to, and maybe you're not able to because the people around you are only wanting you to focus on the negative. They're only wanting you to focus on the bad within that relationship. And rightfully so, because there's a high risk associated with abuse. So they're saying it out of concern, which is perfectly normal. But they also have to understand, as your support system, as your family and friends, that there were also good times. And so you have to be able to look at both and embrace both to be able to grieve it properly. Because if you're only grieving the bad things, then you're denying yourself of the good things. And you know that happened too, so it's like you're gaslighting yourself. So grief recovery was a big game changer for me. It did change how I process loss, how I recognize loss, and that anything, any change to your typical routine can be a loss, good or bad. Knowing that, being able to recognize that, helped me to not only process the grief of things changing within my my status in terms of going from being employed to being an entrepreneur full time, right? Has a lot of emotions tied to it, and so I have to be able to process that. But even from the standpoint of death, right? In the time since going through grief recovery, I've lost 3 loved ones, and my reaction to it is vastly different than it would have been before grief recovery. Like, these are all things that helped me to understand myself better. And by understanding myself, then I can give myself some grace for, okay, that's why I think about it in this way. That's why I react in this way. And by knowing that, I can change my behavior. So it's self-governance, right? It's being able to recognize my behavior, and the things that I don't like about my behavior, I can change it. There are so many tools out there, so many resources, but you have to know what you need help with in order to seek that help, whether it's from a professional or whether it's just finding books on Amazon like I did that help you on your journey to becoming the best version of yourself, getting to a point where you don't play about you. I have gotten to a point where I am very comfortable, like I said, in my weird and nerdy skin. I do cosplay now, always wanted to, never did. I am comfortable with the things that I enjoy, that most people wouldn't think to even try. I carry myself with more confidence. I carry myself with a self-respect that lets other people know how to treat me. And that's not to say that if you've ever been in a position where you haven't done that, that you're not worthy of respect, because you are. But we do have to have that first. We have to love ourselves first. And that's hard to do when you're in an abusive relationship. If you've grown up in an abusive household, if the people around you have always been negative and talked down to you, how do you develop that? Who's modeling that behavior for you? Because the people who are being abusive clearly have issues themselves. And so they're not the model, they're not the role model that you need for self-love. Because a lot of times the reason that they are abusing you is because there's something within them that's broken and needs to be healed. Thank you so much for watching the Empowered and in Control podcast. Hey, have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When people recommended it to me, I had no idea where to start. I didn't know anything about podcasting. And then I saw the ads for the My 7-Figure podcast. Now, 7 figures did pique my interest, but I had no idea how people were making money podcasting. What really got me was the idea of being able to help so many more people through a podcast. So I signed up for the course and the community. It is so thorough, let me tell you. From branding to making sure that it's legally protected to monetizing, they left no guesswork and no excuses. So click the link in the description to sign up for my 7-Figure podcast course and invest in your future. There are podcasts about everything, but there are certain things that people only want to hear from you. So get started today. People need to hear your voice. So here are some things that I recommend. I recommend looking at the things that you are passionate about, the things that you really get fired up for, whether it's social justice things or whether it is activities that you like to do for recreation, anything that you like to do for fun. If you don't currently have a support system, if you don't currently have a group of people who are looking out for you, who want you to win, who are willing to help you, and who can serve as encouragement and also serve as that external validation until you can build that internal validation, I suggest that you look into those spaces of things that you're already passionate about. I'm not telling you to try new things in order to find new people. The things that you're already interested in, find people within that group. You more than likely have more in common with them than just that, right? Be aware of what things a support system should and should not do. There are certain things that people who are trauma-informed and emotionally intelligent are going to get more than people who are not. They're going to understand that they need consent for certain things. They're going to understand that you have the right to make your own decisions about things. Even if they disagree with it, they understand that you are your own person and that you have the autonomy to make your own decisions. So get familiar with what things are do's and don'ts for your support system. With having that support system and that validation to back you up, that is backup, right? You're also going to learn more about yourself. Think about the things that you feel like you struggle in. What are the things that, no matter what else is going well in your life, there are certain things that you struggle with. I'll tell you, mine is consistency. I look at my strengths, and consistency is lower on the list, right? It's still on there, but it's lower on the list. My therapist and I have determined that chaos is something that I've always lived in and or worked in. So think about that for a second. If you've grown up in an abusive household, there has been chaos. If you are growing up in a neighborhood with community violence, there has been some form of chaos. Then I get into a field where a lot of what's required is making sense out of chaos, right? It requires crisis intervention. It requires pivoting and being able to make changes mid-course, because that's what emergency services require, especially in domestic and sexual violence, right? Those are the environments that I'm used to being in, where everything is chaotic, nothing is the same from one day to the next. That is an adjustment to becoming a full-time entrepreneur, where consistency is key, right? It's an adjustment when it comes to podcasting. Consistency is key. So because I know that the traumas of my past are impacting my ability to be consistent today, that's something that I have to actively work on, right? So think about what things you know that you need to work on. You may not be able to pinpoint it at the moment. Counseling is really good for that. I'm a big advocate for therapy, but you have to find the right therapist. If you have somebody who doesn't truly understand you, for example, I started out with a therapist who was a white woman, and we had a great rapport. Like, we got along great. It was almost like it was catching up with a friend as opposed to therapy. But when the tragedy of George Floyd happened, I didn't feel like she fully understood the generational trauma and the consistent trauma that people of color, particularly Black people, go through in this country. So therefore, I felt I needed a Black woman therapist. And so that's what I sought out. That's the therapist that I've been going to have been Black women. And I feel more validated. I feel more seen, because they are going through some of the same things. Systemic racism does not discriminate based on your job title. The things that I recommend that you do at this point, I'd say get together your support system, right? Who can provide that external validation until you build that internal validation so that you don't need that as much, right? Those people should be your backup. They should be your cheering section. They should be able to identify things within you that you can't, whether that's positive or negative, right? But they should be supportive individuals. And then make sure that you are striving for self-awareness, whether that's with a professional, which is what I recommend because they are trained to be able to identify things that we who are not in the mental health field typically aren't. Whether that comes from a professional or whether you just know that there are certain things that you want to see different, certain behaviors, patterns within your behaviors that you feel could use some tweaking in order for you to have better outcomes, whether that's in your job, in your relationships, internally. You know, if you're a person that's constantly talking down to yourself or being hard on yourself, that's something that you probably don't want to do, and you just have been doing it so long that you don't know any other way, right? Well, you can change that. That's what's great about the brain, right? You can learn new skills and get to the point where you rewire your brain, even as it pertains to trauma and memories and all of that. Again, recommend a professional to help you with that. But that process of having that external validation while you're learning about yourself typically produces that compassion. You start to see yourself a little bit differently, right? Sometimes you're able to see yourself the way that you've been looking at people that you love. When they've been having a hard time, you don't call them out of their name or give them a really hard time about the thing that they are struggling with. Love yourself the way you've been loving them, right? With that self-love, then that turns into self-worth. At least that's been my experience, right? That self-worth brings you to a point of loving yourself so much that you will not allow people to be disrespectful to you because you know what you're worth, and you recognize that their feelings are not any more important than yours. Why would your feelings be less important? And who told you that they were less important? A lot of times that's where boundaries come in. And one of my favorite quotes is that people who don't like you having boundaries or setting boundaries are people who benefited from you not having them before. So as you're on this journey, understand that there are probably going to be people in your life who don't like the fact that you're trying to improve, that you're trying to be a better version of yourself. And that may come in the form of, accusing you of thinking that you're better than them or other people, or that you're becoming self-centered or narcissistic or any of those things. Don't let people gaslight you into thinking that loving yourself is a bad thing, because society has made that to be a negative. We're supposed to be humble about things, and there is a certain level of humility that I think that we should have. There's a difference between confidence and arrogance. Confidence comes from knowing what things you're good at, right? I think you should be looking at some of the things that you have survived, some of the things that you have accomplished, big and small wins, right? Those things should build your confidence. Those things should make you feel that you are worthy of having a safe, healthy, and happy life. I want you to start that journey, if you haven't already, of getting to the point where you don't play about you. Let me know in the comments. I really want to know if you have already gotten to that point. What did you do to get there? Because your comments may help someone else. If you are just starting this journey and you're thinking, you know what, I probably do need to work on my self-worth, my self-esteem, and my self-compassion more than anything else. Drop that in the comments as well. What things do you feel like you need in order to support that journey? Are you in counseling? Do you feel like you can do it on your own with different forms of therapy, different forms of healing? Because there are those that are non-traditional. And I'm hoping that you guys are at a point, or going to get to a point, where you don't play about you just like I don't play about me. I'll see you next time.